Good evening. Welcome to the Muscatine Community Board of Education School District Monday, September 13th meeting. Madam Secretary, would you take roll and determine a quorum, please?
My pleasure. Director Cooney?
Here.
DeBeat?
Here.
Draba?
Here.
Finn?
Here.
Carter?
Here.
Morgan?
Here.
Sure.
Here.
All are present.
Thank you. Since a little before COVID started, or maybe as COVID started, we started using students throughout the district in pre-recorded videos to lead us in the pledge. So tonight we have Miss Musell's 6th grade Madison elementary class that'll be leading us in the pledge. So I would ask, if you are able, please stand and join us for the pledge. And we thank them for doing the pledge. It's always great to see the pledge, and it's always fun to get a little message at the very end. So we appreciate that. The next item on our agenda is our Citizen Speaks portion of the agenda. We would invite anyone from the audience that would like to address the board to step forward to the podium. I would also say please pull the mic close to you or adjust it to you so you can be heard. We ask you to state your name and address so that our board secretary can capture it for our minutes. We also ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And please know, while the board is always pleased to hear from anyone that wants to address them, we are not able to engage in conversation, but you can always contact board members before and after board meetings. If you ever need numbers to reach us, you can always call the administration office. Our emails are also on our website. That being said, is there anyone that would like to address the board? All right. We'll keep moving along. Our next section falls under our board targets and goals report. And those are, I'm going to read these 3 goals to you, and then we'll hit the first one. Students will graduate prepared for post-secondary options. Muscatine schools will utilize resources effectively and equitably, and students will learn in a positive and supportive environment. I'm going to jump back up to A. I'm not going to jump back up to A. So we will catch our student update at a later time. Activities sometimes deem they conflict with a board meeting, which is, we like students involved, so that's great. So we will jump to letter C then, which is students will learn in a positive and supportive environment. And we have 2 topics, and Clint, I think you're going to lead us through both of those, yes?
I will, thank you. So tonight we wanted to take just a little bit of time to kind of look back to last year and some of the information that we have for you relative to the year. We know it was a challenging year, and again, many times throughout the year, on a monthly basis, we were bringing you information on attendance and all kinds of things as we move through the year. So I want to present at least some of the information that we do have available. I will tell you our Iowa assessment data has not officially been released yet. So as of this morning, we still didn't have access to download the Excel file. So we'll come back to you with that information when we have it, okay? So with that, we'll start with graduation rate. This is something we've been talking about for quite a bit. As you look back through, back to 2017, we were at 84%. And then in 2020, our last year that we have information, we were at 82%. Now please note that 2020 is not last year. So our graduates would have been the class of 2021. We will not have graduation information on last year's class until January of 2022. Okay, so I just want to make sure everyone is clear on that. We won't have that information yet. We know these numbers are not where we want them, which is why last year we had a lot of conversations around this, including Portrait of a Muskie Grad. In addition to that, we talked about our courses and pathways and flexibility around that. We talked about our graduation requirements. Those were all part of our conversation, as well as an increased focus on work-based learning experiences, and those are happening this year. The other thing that we're doing is the high school is having a team look at kind of a freshman focus, whether that becomes a freshman academy, but how do we ensure we bring freshmen in and help them get off to the best start possible, because we know if they can get that good start, they're more likely to graduate. So there are a number of things that we worked on and began to implement last year that will be impacting this graduation rate. None of the things we did last year will be reflected in this data yet. And again, we'll have that information in January when that is released. So we'll bring that back to you again at that time.
Clint, do we know if those are 4-year numbers or 5-year numbers?
These are 4-year numbers.
4-year numbers.
That is looking at freshmen as they start and whether they finish in 4 years. There is a 5-year graduation rate as well. I will tell you it's not much higher than the 4-year rate. It goes up 2 or 3%.
Right.
The other thing we spent a great deal of time talking about last year was absenteeism and chronic absenteeism. So as we break this out from elementary, junior high, high school, and on overall as a district, you can see from an elementary standpoint, going back to 2018-19, we were at about 13%, and last year we're at 23%. As you look at 19-20, there's an asterisk there. The reason there's an asterisk there is because we quit taking attendance in March, because that's when you went on shutdown and students were working from home. It was kind of an optional thing. So that is, for 19-20, that really is as of that time. It's likely then we would have seen additional absence issues there, but that's the data that we have available. So you can see on average, we were significantly higher last year. One of the things we talked about, part of the reason for that is with quarantine. When you are out on quarantine, that's 10 days. And so again, we had a number of students out on that. That has an impact on that chronic absenteeism. So a couple other pieces. One for the high school last year, that number at 25, just about 26%, is actually lower than some of the numbers we talked about last year. And that's because as we got towards the end of the year, in conversations with the state, there was a different way we should have been calculating some of the attendance. If students miss for more than 10 consecutive days and we don't hear anything from them, we have to drop them in the system. And really what happens then is you deactivate them. If they return and kind of re-enroll, then we bring them up again, but you don't count them absent for that, you unenroll them at that period of time in the school year. And then we're not, because a lot of kids are just not showing up at that point, and it doesn't count against your attendance. So based on conversations with the state and how we should have been kind of marking that changed that number to about 26%. Okay. Chronic absenteeism and just attendance in general is something that we're focused on at all levels this year. And I want you to think back to the work we've talked about recently with our desired daily experience. Part of that work is ensuring that kids are feeling safe and comfortable and wanting to come to school. That ties in to that work. In terms of interventions in our student support teams at each of our buildings, making sure that immediately when we start seeing 2 or 3 absences, calls are going home. So there is a process, and you'll see some of those in our documents later. Part of that work this year, as Joelle worked with our administrators and with our team from the district, we had policies in place, we had procedures in place. In many cases, there wasn't alignment in that, and in some cases, it wasn't being followed. So part of that work is to ensure that we consistently have those policies, everyone's aware of those, and that we're following those policies. I think it also ties in, especially with the last year and a half, just with our social emotional support for students. and mental health. And again, tonight we'll be coming to you with a proposal in agreement with Robert Young to help provide some more in-depth services within our school buildings. Again, to help sure that kids are ready to learn and they're coming to school and they're excited to be there. So again, as I mentioned, Joelle has also worked on that attendance process. So as we go through that, after a certain number of days, there's calls home, there's follow-up. After 5 days, there's a letter. And as we move forward with that, at some point the county gets involved. And so we had the opportunity to sit down with the county attorney, with Jim Berry and his team, had a great conversation. In that conversation, as we discussed it, as we move through the number of days that kids are absent, 5 days, 10 days, 15 days, we send out 3 letters. After our 3rd letter, students are gone if they miss more days and the county gets involved, then they send 3 letters. So by the time we sent 3 letters, the county has sent 3 letters, and we're actually to that point where we're talking about more intensive intervention from the court system to parents. We're a semester down, and that's just way too much time. So what the change that we agreed upon that I think will be beneficial is that when our 3rd letter goes out to families saying you've missed, at that point I think it's 15 days of school, their first letter from the county goes out. So we've already, by that point, we've done home visits. Principals have visited the homes. Our navigators have been in communication with those families. So a lot of things have happened to try to find the barriers to getting kids to school, and a lot has happened to support them. That also includes, almost on a daily basis, our principals and staff out in their cars trying to round up kids, knocking on doors, picking up kids, getting them to school. So there is a tremendous amount of support to try to get kids to school. And then after that 3rd letter goes out from the district, the 1st letter goes out from the county. If additional days are missed, we can have our school resource officers visit the home and check in with them and remind them of the responsibility of get kids to school. And again, all along those lines, we're looking and asking, how can we help? How do we provide support in order to get, because we need kids here so that they can learn. Okay. So we'll continue to focus on that absenteeism this year. Obviously, this year, starting out with COVID, we're going to have some more attendance issues with kids out and missing some days, but we'll continue to keep you updated on how that's looking as we move throughout the year. Questions about attendance?
Yeah, it has to do with when you say that the county gets involved with their 3 letters. What is the intent with that, and what happens at the end of that process? A little clearer, please.
So at some point, they can be families can be ticketed because you have a legal responsibility to get kids to school. It's state law; they have to be in school and they have to be attending. So that could be a ticket, that could be a fine, it could go through the court system. Ultimately, the goal, everyone's goal, is to get kids to school. It is not to try to punish parents. It is not trying to punish kids. We just need them at school. And so those are the next steps in the process. It's not very many families that get to that point.
Is that just through the 8th grade level, or is that all the way through high school?
High school.
High school?
Yep.
Through 7 to 16, right?
Yeah, once they hit 17, it gets a little bit more challenging, or once they're 18, then the parents have not as much influence, and it does get more challenging. Okay. FAST assessment. This is some of our literacy data over the past years. So this is done at the K-6 level and submitted to the state. You can see our comparison in the district from the spring and to the state in those years. You see in 1920, we did not give that assessment because students weren't here during the spring of 1920. And you can see where we were last year. So typically we're a little bit higher than the state average. Last year during the pandemic, we fell a little bit below. And so right now, they're currently in the process of doing those FAST assessments for the fall. So we do them fall and spring. They are reported to the state. So they're in the process of finishing up those FAST assessments currently. And part of that, as we'll look at that, as we think about some of the things we've done since last spring. So a number of our students, over 300, attended our Summer Spark program. We're going to be looking at their spring data to their fall data. Typically, especially at that elementary level, you see what they call a summer loss, right? Where our scores will dip, and then as we move through the year, they come back up. That's not just Muscatine, that's across the country. They typically dip more in math than they do in reading. So again, one of the things we'll be looking at very closely is the students who attended that Summer Spark program. Are we seeing the same kind of summer loss that we would typically see, or that we saw with students who didn't attend Summer Spark? So even for a lot of kids, if we can get them even, so the score they have in the spring is the same as the score they have in the fall, that's a win, right? So we'll be looking at that very closely. The other piece that ties into this, that we'll talk a little bit about later in the presentation, is Muskie Connect. It's that opportunity for each of our teachers to meet with the student individually and their parents, share information, get some initial assessment information, again, quicker to their levels and to an instructional level that's appropriate for the student. And so we want to see the impact of that as well. Questions about our FAST assessment? ACT, so you've got some previous years there from 17, 18, the number of students we tested, and the average ACT composite. You will notice in 2021 that our score did go up to 21.7, which is good, but we tested significantly fewer kids. So at about 190 kids, it puts us in that 50 to 60% of students that we tested, which is pretty typical across the state. So when you look at comparable high schools and districts across the state, that's a fairly common percentage of students tested. And one of the things that we talked about last year, we did not require it last year. And moving forward, we're not going to require it for all students. You can take the test as a junior, we will pay for it. You can take the test as a senior, and we will cover the cost of that as well. So by providing that flexibility, we actually are giving kids more opportunities to take that test. When you align that to our flexible pathways and that portrait of a Muskie grad, as they're looking at their course selections, one of the things we talked about was that if you you had decided that maybe college is not for me, and then in your junior year you decide, hey, wait, I could really do this, you still have an opportunity. And that was important in developing those pathways so that we can still get you there. And they'll still have an opportunity to take that ACT test if they need that. Questions about ACT?
Yeah, Clint, I have a question. In terms of students, is it their choice to take that? Meaning, like the students will come forward, let's say, and say, hey, I would like to take this test, or are we recommending those students?
I think we're doing, but I mean, we're recommending students take it. We're just not requiring it.
Yes.
Right? So counselors are talking to them and conversations with staff and with parents. We're certainly encouraging that, but it's not required.
But no student that requests it is being denied,
Correct.
right? Do we know the number of students that were taking the test prior to us mandating it with our juniors? Because I think that was like 2015, 16, maybe 14, 15 when we started with all of our juniors. So do we know how many people took it in 2012? Do we have that information?
I don't have that.
It would be to me, it'd be, sorry to interrupt, but it would be interesting to see from my standpoint where that 190 compares to that number. Because I think that 190 is probably significantly higher than that when we were offering to, because now we're offering to pay and we're really encouraging everyone to take it, to give it a try, and to take it more than once if you can. My second question is, do we know what the state average was for the ACT?
I do not have that
So
for you.
if we could find that out, it'd be nice to see where that 21.7 compares. I think it's probably pretty close to, it's usually around 21 and a half, 22, I think.
We can find that
So,
out. In terms of previous years, number of students tested, I would probably present that as a percentage, only because those classes fluctuate.
Right.
And depending on where enrollment's going, that could impact that.
okay, fair.
So we'll talk a little bit about conditions of learning. This is a survey that's given to students in 3rd through 5th grade and 6th through 12th grade. What you're seeing here are the results from last year for the 3rd through 5th grade students. And it asks things about adult to student relationships, emotional safety, you can see boundaries, physical safety, student-to-student relationships. So again, we don't have data prior to this, and then of course there was in spring of 2020, we did not take this at all. So this is the first year we have comparable data for 3rd through 5th grade to share with you, but we'll continue to share that out. As you can see, in comparison to the state, we're kind of right where the state is, a little bit higher in all of those categories. That looks a little bit different for our 6th through 12th grade. What you can see, and this is similar to a lot of the trends that we saw, that our trends with the state are really trends with our data for where we were in the past to where we were last year. Obviously, there were some areas where we lost ground and other areas where we gained ground, but very consistent with results across the state. You can see the one area where we lost ground from where we were in 2019 was adult to student relationships. Remember, there's 2 years of gap there. There was a significant amount of months where students weren't at school at all. Also between hybrid, online learning last year, it makes sense that some of those adult to student relationships, we've seen a change in that data. And it's the same reason we see that data at the state level do essentially the same thing. So the important piece about conditions for learning, both 3rd through 5th and 6th through 12, it's also part of our vision card work. It's something that we are monitoring in addition to those desired daily experiences that we'll be using kind of as another survey tool to gauge students' level of how they're feeling at school, that safety piece, and that engagement. So we're going to continue to track this and report that out to you. I know it, specifically Susan Clark Junior High kind of has been using that as part of their improvement plan and a piece of data that they're focused on to improve some of those scores. Any questions about conditions for learning? So before we move into the next piece, which is Muskie Connect, I just kind of want to summarize the data that presenting from last year. So we've talked about graduation rate, we've talked about attendance, we've talked about some assessment components, some academic components, and they're all areas where we still need to do better. But we're continuing, I think, to do the right work in order to get there. When you think about the things that we've talked about, in terms of our desired daily experiences, the things we're focused on as a district level, it's around these things. The vision card that we developed last spring will be moving forward. It's looking at our students on track to graduation. It's looking at those conditions of learning, of the desired daily experiences. It's looking at common formative assessments that will be developed based on the standards for courses and grade levels. So that we can continue to monitor that progress. So this is information we'll continue to bring to you because it's built into our operational plan and that vision card. And with that, any additional questions? Okay. Then I'm going to move into Muskie Connect. I'm going to let Joelle talk about this a little bit.
All right, so as you remember, we held Muskie Connect this year for our kindergarten through 6th grade students and families. So the next few slides are the results, the survey results from Muskie Connect. So it was held on Monday, August 23rd from 10 to 7 and Tuesday, August 24th from 8 to 5. And it was held at every elementary school. So the purpose of Muskie Connect was to allow parents a one-on-one time to meet with their child's teacher. Families could visit other staff members in the building, such as the nurse, the reading teachers, or whoever they wanted to visit with. They could visit different spots in the building. Teachers also gave students a quick math or reading assessment, reading and math assessment, which kind of helped them be able to start right away with students and giving supports and instruction. And so our results from the Muskie Connect survey, the first one is from our parents. And the first one talks about our child felt emotionally and physically ready to start school. And you can see that 94% of our parents felt strongly about that. That when they visited the school, they felt respected and valued, and that they were a partner in their child's learning. Also, that it gave the parents a chance to ask questions and learn more about their child's classroom experience, that 96% of them felt strongly about that. And lastly, my child's excited to come to school, and they know it's important for their success to be at school each day, and 99% of our parents felt strongly. These survey results, when we asked questions, we did tie them back to the daily desired experiences that we are working on as a district. And so it just kind of gave us a little bit more information about how families feel, when they are in our schools. Then, oops, sorry. Oh, you clicked
Sorry,
it
I
for
was
me.
gonna
Sorry
help
about that. So the next one was from our staff. And overall, they felt that it was it made a positive difference for families and students, and that families felt welcomed and invited to be a part of their child's learning. The assessment for my grade level gave me information to help me understand about students. That score was around 75%. So when we looked a little bit deeper into that feedback, it mostly was from our teachers in the upper grades that felt like we could maybe look at those assessments again and try to come up with maybe a shorter version, or maybe to give it a little bit differently. And so we will be pulling our initial group of teachers back together and looking at that assessment for the upper grades. And then the last one, the teachers felt more prepared to start school based on the Muskie Connect experience. 85% of them strongly agreed to that. So overall, we, just in responses, and we did visit all of the buildings and had an opportunity just to hear from parents and kids, and there was just a lot of excitement in the buildings. A lot of the schools did different activities with the kids where they could go on scavenger hunts, and they had popcorn, and kids were just big smiles on their faces, and teachers, just overall a lot of positive comments from our families and kids and teachers. So we will continue to hold Muskie Connect for our families, and we'll be pulling back again our initial group of teachers and looking at ways that we can always get better and improve in that process. Do you have any questions about Muskie Connect?
Joelle, do you know how many, you have 171 responses. Out of how many, do we know?
Yep, I knew that somebody might ask that. So we estimated that we have about 1,500-ish, 1,600 families that are K-6, and that's kind of an estimate. So, with 400, it's not maybe as many as we would have liked to respond, but, even being in the buildings, and administrators gave a lot of feedback, and just talking with families and their staff, afterwards. I think it was overall a very positive experience.
But Joelle, for staff, that would be a high rate of
Oh, for our
response.
staff, sorry, I thought you asked about
171.
parents. For our staff, 171. I don't have the exact number, but that's pretty high for our staff, yeah.
Because we have about 400 teaching staff, right around there.
Yeah,
About half at the elementary level.
yeah.
So that puts
Yeah.
a pretty high response rate.
Percentage.
Yeah.
Any other questions about Muskie Connect? Okay, now I'll move into COVID update. I want to spend a little time just kind of updating you on the current status of things. So we'll start out at a district level. We've had about, as of this afternoon, 82 confirmed positive cases across the district, and about half of those at the secondary level, kind of split between the junior high and high school. To date, we've had 11 positive staff, again, across the district, and that's all staff, teaching staff, our custodial staff, paraprofessionals, et cetera, school bus drivers. Connected to that, I just want to talk a little bit about vaccines. So going back to last spring when we held those clinics, by the time we finished those clinics, we had 702 staff members vaccinated. That's a really high number, and it's probably relates to about an 80% vaccination rate, because it also included coaches and substitutes. So there's a few more than what, if we look at about 800 staff across the district with everyone. But when you add subs and coaches, that number would go up. Still a very high percentage. And again, after that point, we don't necessarily have data if other people went out and got vaccinated since that time, but feel really good about that. When you look at teachers specifically, so our certified teaching staff, we had 429, and that includes our instructional coaches. So usually we have right around 400 certified teaching staff. But again, when you include the coaches and some of those other positions, that's a very high percentage. So I'd put that in that 90 to 95% vaccinated for our classroom teaching staff, which again is good. We know that's the most effective way to prevent spread and reduce severity of the disease. So when you put that in comparison to other districts, other communities, other industries, that's very high. So I feel very fortunate that we've done that. One of the challenges that we're seeing this year, again with Delta coming in, more students, it's more contagious, and so it's out there in the community, which means it's also in our schools. The additional challenge is that the other thing we're seeing, last year we had students wearing masks pretty much all year to the very, very end. And because of that, we didn't see RSV, we didn't see influenza, we didn't see the kind of intestinal flu and a lot of those strep throat, other things. We're seeing that now, right? So in addition to dealing with COVID, we're also dealing with just illness in general. And typically in the fall when it's hot like this, allergies. So we have a lot of kids with a lot of symptoms. And that's been a challenge, right? So we're watching that very closely. The concern around that too is, although our staff, we have a high number of staff that are vaccinated, the challenge becomes a lot of those staff are parents. And if kids are home because they're sick, then our staff stay home with them, right? So we could end up in some staffing issues, not necessarily because our staff haven't done their part and gotten vaccinated, just because the amount of illness that's out there. Again, that's something we're watching very closely. Additional pieces around that. So everyone is aware of House File 847. That was passed into law last May, right at the end of the year. That prevented us from continuing to mandate masks at all for staff, students, or the community on school premises. So I was prepared to update you that as of now it's still in place, but as of at least to my knowledge, about 4 o'clock, there is a federal judge that has overturned that, or at least temporarily put a hold on that. Don't know what that means yet for us, but something we'll have to take a close look at. I know there's a group of superintendents across the state meeting tomorrow morning at 9, and trying to get our arms around what that means and what impact that has, and what those options are for us. So I want to talk a little bit about that yet tonight. But I also want to talk about Senate File 160. And the impact of that is what Senate File 160 does is it requires in-person instruction for any student that is enrolled. So we have to provide in-person instruction when parents send kids. So there are no waivers for hours or days of instruction, and we have no ability to do remote learning days the way we did last year. So when people ask, well, when are you going to shut down this classroom? When are you going to shut down this school? We don't, because of this Senate File 160, we have to continue to provide in-person instruction, which again comes back to that concern about staffing and about keeping everyone as healthy as possible. That will be a challenge for us, but something we have to do. So with that, I'll open it up to questions, but that is as up to date on COVID and where we're at as I can possibly get you as of 7:36 p.m.
So do we have any data or anything about how many students actually do wear a mask and how many of our staff wear masks when they're instructing?
Danny, I would tell you that number is extraordinarily low at all levels. Just not very many. Period.
I would like to, along with that, is just voice my concern because we are asking that the kids, students, and everybody to be careful, wear their masks and such. And yes, there are, from my knowledge, quite a few teachers that may not be wearing masks. Yes, they may be vaccinated, but due to other concerns because of the kids, I have not a problem about saying upright that I would be in favor of, if we had that mandate available to us, that I would do that. But I do understand that we are required to wait a while before we get a really good reading, as in what has happened with this new information.
To piggyback off of that, I thought John was going to speak, so I was waiting. But I would agree with that. My personal opinion is beside, it would be in support of that. But I also think that we were an elected body to represent all of our community. And I'm sure that this topic is heated on both sides. So to some extent, I'm glad that we can't do anything tonight because it's not on our action agenda. But I also think it provides us an opportunity to go out and gather information, to try to hear from people that would not be in support of a mask mandate, or if you strongly are in support of it, to hear either way. I think it gives a chance it gives us a little bit of time for our public, for our community, specifically our school community, because we are elected to represent school parents, the children of the school. That's my belief, is that I'm here to be the voice for school parents and kids, a little bit more than I would be the community in general. But so, I would hope that we would try to take advantage of that and to really see what kind of feelings people do have. If you have a voice, if you have a concern, share it with us. That's what I would ask.
Well, I want to put a twist on that and say something. Same topic, but perhaps maybe different way to look at it. Can we offer a vaccination clinic again? Because again, we maybe miss some, whether staff, teachers, even students last year. So, because the more we offer that to people, perhaps the less headache at the end will be for all of us. So I don't know what's the possibility to do something like that and encourage people. Obviously, we cannot mandate that. Everybody knows that. But at least we encourage people perhaps to take the vaccine and let them know why we are encouraging them. I think that's another thing to look at or think about.
John, I think one of the issues from a parent concern, having grandkids, they're not eligible to get the vaccine yet. So in my opinion, I have to protect them, right? I'm just speaking as a grandparent. I think there are a lot of parents that are concerned because their kids are being placed in a place that it makes them uneasy because they can't get the vaccine. The minute they're eligible to get the vaccine, I know that there'll be people rushing out to get their kids the vaccine.
And I agree with you, Mike, and I'm thinking more like because the vaccine for kids came a little bit late, so perhaps now if we offer that again, we get more students above age 12, perhaps to have that vaccine, and that's something just I'm thinking about it out of the box that can help too.
I think a clinic is fairly easy to set up. I know we have community partners that'd be more than happy to do that. I think as you look at the county data, it's continued to kind of trickle in a few more vaccinations each week, but that's certainly something we can set up.
I think though what happens in the next coming days and the more information we have will be important. Obviously, what I'm hearing from all of you is safety of our staff and students is priority number one. If there were an easy way to do that or a fix to that, we'd be talking about something else tonight. And that's not the case. And I agree, it's a difficult topic. Not everybody agrees. But I do think everybody wants to see our students and our staff and our community safe. And I do believe that probably is going to be some tough decisions in the coming days, and we're not done. We've just spent 18 months of making nothing but tough decisions. And we've been extremely lucky in the decisions that we've made, that they've fared very well for our community and our district through, I shouldn't just say luck, we've followed science, we've had great data, we have had community partners to help us, and we will need to continue to rely on that. And I would ask that people be patient and that they be kind to one another. I too would welcome comments. Mike said, let's hear what people are thinking, and in a kind and respectful way. We can certainly figure this out. So I look forward to hearing more, maybe sooner than later on this topic. So
we'll continue to gather information. I would just share with you that I think that, and Mike, you did kind of speak to this as well. To me, there's a difference somewhat with our elementary students and our secondary students. Secondary students have access to the vaccine and they can wear masks. We don't have that at the elementary. So in whatever recommendation that we make to you as a board, access to the vaccine would be a criteria in that, as well as community spread. So I don't think anyone wants to have masks. We would prefer that all of this just be over, but it's not. To me, it changes the dynamic when elementary students have access to a vaccine, right? Because then again, there's an extra level of protection there that they currently don't have. So I don't see it as being in any direction, a permanent decision. It's something we're going to have to continue to monitor and make adjustments as we move forward, as we did last year. And sometimes we could make that decision, and sometimes it was made for us. And there's probably going to be a lot more of that happens as well.
and sometimes a decision changes day to day.
That is true.
So. All right, are we good? Is that all right. Next on our agenda are action and possible action items. The following items are considered to be routine by the Board of Education and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a director so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence from the agenda. Those items are minutes, bills and claims, employment recommendations, board policy, statewide voluntary preschool program contract, and we have a student teaching agreement. What are the wishes of the board?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? And the motion carries. The next item on our agenda is to approve the contract between the Muscatine Community School District and the Robert Young Center for an on-site therapist. And Clint briefly mentioned this in one of his updates as well. Clint, do you have any additional information that you want to share on this agenda item?
Yeah, I would just, again, share that this is an opportunity with Robert Young Center to provide a dedicated staff member, mental health therapist that will be on site at the high school, serving high school and junior high students. They continue to look for an additional therapist who would serve our elementary students. They will be providing scheduled sessions with students that were recommended. Again, that would have to go through, a process where parents sign off on that. So it's not just something where they would start working with students. So there's a process, and staff would be able to recommend students and kind of get the ball rolling on some of that. They'd also be available for kind of crisis intervention and just supporting students in crisis. I think this is a great opportunity for our students and for the district. You'll notice the contract is for 12 months. And that's so that they continue to get services when school's not in session, because their life continues on and those struggles continue on as well. So they're continuing to provide support. I know one of the things right now, so we're able to kind of leverage ESSER dollars to support this, which is a great opportunity for us. Down the road, Robert Young is in the process of working on certification for a community mental health provider. Once they have that certification, that allows them to bill insurance and use Medicaid claiming, which is a way to offset the cost to the district. So we can reduce that cost down the road significantly, but at least for now, we're able to leverage those ESSER dollars. So I know our administrators are excited about this opportunity and do feel like it's going to benefit a lot of kids. So with that, I would recommend that the board approve that contract.
What are the wishes of the board on this item?
I'll make the motion to approve the contract between Muscatine Community School District and the Robert Young Center for an
Second.
on-site therapist.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the contract between the school district and Robert Young for an on-site therapist. Is there any discussion? I'm incredibly grateful to Robert Young to be willing to partner with us, even thinking about if transportation would be a potential barrier for a student, that having someone on site, again, through approval with a parent or a guardian, but having transportation isn't a barrier. Time is not a barrier. What a great outreach for our students. All those in favor of approving the contract, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. I was so anxious to get to the Robert Young part that I skipped approving the following administrative regulations. Thank you for all of you who were so polite, who just kind of went along with the fact that I missed that. And thank you for my reminder from the audience. So we're going to step back to letter I, as in igloo. And the approval that's needed is for the following administrative regulations. So there is a attendance admin regulations, there's student appearance, which is an admin regulations, a substance-free workplace, an admin regulation, and a substance-free workplace, which is an exhibit, and employee identification badges, which is a admin regulation. What are the wishes of the board on these 5 regulations?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second?
It's going to be really bad if y'all didn't approve them after I skipped them. Is there any discussion on those 5 items? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? And the motion carries. All right, now that we've backtracked, sorry about that, everybody. That takes us to item or letter K, which is to approve the unified contract addendum for district administrators. This is for the 2021-2022 school year. What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the unified contract addendum for the district administrators. That's for the 2021-22 school year. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. The next item is to approve the hourly employee handbook for the 2021-2022 school year.
I move to approve this.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the hourly employee handbook. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. Our last action item is to approve the student handbook for the 2021-2022 school year. What are the wishes of the board?
Make a motion to approve the student handbook for the 21-22 school year.
And is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the student handbook. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? And the motion carries. That takes us to our discussion and information. Tom is already taking command of the PowerPoint.
Oh, no, I
see
won't
it
have a
now.
PowerPoint. I'm not that sophisticated.
Oh, you're not going to, all right.
tonight.
Tom is taking command of the podium, and he's going to start with a timeline for financial-related board agenda items,
Yeah.
I think. Yes?
Yes, I'm going to kind of stick with the theme and talk about 2020, 2021 here. I did table like the June certified annual report financials until October 11th, but however, I did provide this morning a couple of key financial indicators that I think are important to review. So, as far as the timeline goes, you know, next month you'll hear about the FY21 financials and some other annual things. You know, the special ed supplement, our annual transportation report, and the certified annual report are due in 2 days. So, big day for Iowa Public Schools, and we will meet that deadline. But I don't have everything completely finalized in the way I want to present. So, I'm providing these 2 documents. But I would also mention that October 11th, 12th, 13th, because after September 15th, the fun of fiscal 21 does not end, as we have our school district annual audit then, October 11th, 12th, and 13th. So the first document that I showed you guys was our key financial indicator, unspent authorized budget. In our general fund is what I'm talking about. You know that we operate on the concept of spending authority. And you see there in graph formation, as well as the detail, the current year estimate. I'm still calling it an estimate. And then the prior 3 years actual. So you'll see that our UAB percentage will end up around the 18% mark. So some of that increase is due to some categorical funding that we didn't spend that we have to restrict and use for that purpose this coming year or in future years. So that's part of that increase in unspent authorized budget. And you see there the formula, and then what does the UAB mean, and then FY20, the last year that we have data for the statewide, you can see we're about average, a little less than average, and less than the median percentage. So that is one financial indicator for the fiscal year 21 that I think it's pretty good. And, you know, other than, I'm still calling it an estimate, I don't foresee it changing drastically. So the next document is solvency ratio. And you can see what is the solvency ratio. It gives you that definition there. You know, obviously we're not going to end business June 30th, but that's still what, when we calculate this percentage, it is kind of been going on that downhill trajectory, but we knew that because of cash reserve levy. We haven't been putting in a cash reserve levy the last 2 years. This year that we're in, we started to implement, we had a small cash reserve in the general fund. So I was projecting, I mean, we knew this was gonna go down. It's kind of leveled off, but you know, we did spend around $200,000 more than cash that was brought in. But again, in the general fund, we have that concept of spending authority. So we always won't get cash that we levy for or cash from the state of Iowa, but we still have the authority to spend that. And again, we're 5 to 15% is that recommended goal. And we are, you know, below state average, right around the median that other districts in Iowa are in. So that is short and sweet, but I will give a little more detail on June financials next month, and then, you know, we're going to start building that line item budget for the current year, and I'll start presenting on that later on this year then. So any questions at all?
This is really succinct, Tom. The
Well-
timeline helps, the graph is great, so thank you
Great.
for
You bet.
that.
Thank you.
All right. The next item for discussion is just the first reading on the following policies. And we've got a couple of policies that the recommendation is to delete. And just a reminder, that doesn't mean they just go away. It means they're either covered somewhere else. They've been picked up in another policy. So there's 600.1 types of school organizations, recommendation for deletion. 501.2 is attendance. 401.2, appointment of personnel, recommend deletion. 401.3, the evaluation for employees. And 401.9, payroll deductions. And you will see those a couple of more times. So if you have specific questions on those, if you'll either send those off to Lisa or send them off to Clint, and you'll see them. You'll see them 2 more times before approval. All right, that takes us to our session around board development. And it will be, believe it or not, I know it feels like the year just started, but it will be time, before you know it, to think about superintendent evaluation. And there have been a couple of changes for this year. And so Clint and I just wanted to make sure, I wanted you all to start having that conversation, just what those changes were. So in your board packet, the first document under this item that you see it says Educational Leadership Standards. So the first thing that's really important to remember is that by law, we are required every year to provide a evaluation to our superintendent. And I always say I don't look good in orange, or stripes. So it's important that we do that. And it's also a really important part of growth, and it's what we would also expect that Clint does with his leadership team as well. So as a board, that's an important piece that we owe Clint. In past years, there were 6 standards. So that very first document shows what the 6 standards were. They're on the left and they're in gray. Those standards did not go away, but they're broken out a little bit different and they're blown out, if you will. There are now 10 standards. And this is not, this is done through the, these are Iowa standards for school leaders. So we have SAI has been involved. There's been a state-wide committee that pulls this content together. So it's not Clint suggesting 10. It's not me suggesting 10 by any stretch of the imagination, but it is what the standards are statewide. So ISIL is the acronym that becomes that we refer to. So on the right-hand side of that column, they're not numbered in the right order on purpose. So the 10 that are there, what they did is they matched those up to to what the previous 6 were. So if you remembered previous years and you said, I want to see how they match up. So as an example, vision was one that we used to have, and now that's covered under a couple of different standards. It's covered under mission, vision, and core values. Can also be covered under school improvement. So the 10 really expand out and give a variety, if you will, or a wider breadth of what's covered. The next document that you see in your packet is each of those 10 standards, and there's just a short snippet of what they mean. And I would just ask before our next board meeting that you read through those 10. You don't need to memorize them, you don't need to, but just so that you're familiar with them. Have a chance to look at them. And then one of the things that you'll want to remember is the next document talks about an evaluation form. And this is really to hang on to in the coming months as you all start that evaluation process. While the law says that we're required to evaluate, the law does not say what the tool has to be. So I think as a board, it will be important to decide what you want the tool to be. Let's not make it hard. It should not be painful. There is a beautiful, extensive document. I call it a long form that's been created. It's multiple pages, but it's a lot to digest. There are some shorter forms that are a little bit easier to use. As an example of one of those, if you look at, and I think it's on page 5 of the last document, but it looks like this, and it's just a checklist, has the standards on it, and has all 10, and it's really simple. It's either meets or it doesn't meet. It can be a really quick tool to walk through. You need to look at all 10 standards, but as a board, what will be good for us to do is pick what are the core areas. In agreement, by the way, with Clint, it'll be important that we have that conversation together. Where are the areas that we really want to lean into? Trying to cover all 10 would be tough at best. So thinking about the goals that Clint has created, and he did a great job of creating some 2-year goals that we've all talked about for a year now, and looking at matching up the standards to those goals. So that'll be some homework going forward that we will have as a board to talk about, and we're going to do that in the next month or so. We'll have a closed session and review those with Clint so we can identify where those go. And from there, we'll want to talk about then what's the tool and how do you want to move forward. Creating a timeline to kind of review those, review the progress. Just like our students, we don't wait till the end of the year and say, hey, that's really great, and here's where you have some area to focus on, right? So deciding what you want your timeline to look like will be helpful. There's also a place once you decide kind of what you want to key in on. So let's say we pick 3 of those 10 standards. There's a couple of different forms then that you can use. We can also create our own form if we choose to do that. But the really important piece is what's the goal? And what is that? What does the standard look like that matches to? And if you remember, Clint had a great sheet that he laid out per goal. He had the tasks listed on it. He had his time frame. It would even be really easy. We could just attach the ISIL standard or standards, if there's more than one, to that document and be done. And then you can use that as you work through your progression through the year. Mid-year doesn't have to be exactly mid-year. If you want mid-year to be October, it can be October. If you want mid-year to be January, it can be January. But for us to formulate that plan will be very helpful for Clint, and it'll be helpful for all of us as well. There are some definitions in this packet as well that just talks about that doesn't meet the standards and meets the standards, and then where each step is in between, just to help level set. We probably all have a little bit different idea what that looks like in our own mind. So just having a little conversation about that at our next meeting will be important as well. Pretty straightforward. Does that feel okay? So if you all will just be sure you take a look at that last document before our next meeting when we review with Clint, I think that'll help put us in the right place. And again, the important piece to remember is we're required by law to do it annually. The tool itself is not as important. We'll review the 10 standards and marry those up with goals. Everybody okay on that piece? Okay. Well, then that takes us to our announcements, upcoming events. So tomorrow, Tuesday, September 14th, will be the Riverbend Mobile Food Pantry. It will be at the Administration Center. That's 2900 Mulberry. Registration will begin at 4 p.m. Registration will be done. It'll be done as a drive-through. Okay, I should have asked you that ahead of time. Thank heavens you're nodding and saying yes. So registration will be done as a drive-through. And we did this last month as well. So we'll register you in your vehicle. You don't even need to get out of your vehicle, and there will be somebody there. And that will run until 6 p.m. or until we run out of food, which on occasion does happen. So, but 4:30 to 6 is the actual pickup time. Again, registration will start at 4. Then September 15th takes us to a 2-hour early dismissal. That's for staff professional development. September 16th, you may have heard, there's an election coming up. September 16th is the last day for the filing for school board candidate positions. There are 3 seats that will be up for either election or re-election. That deadline is 5 p.m. and those need to be delivered to the Administration Center at 2900 Mulberry. So that's Thursday, September 16th. September 29th, we jump to the end of the month, there will be a virtual meeting between the City Council, the Board of Supervisors, and the school board. We have tried to implement about a quarterly-ish meeting between the 3 entities. We each are hearing what the other is working on. Some of those pieces, we each have some personal interest in those pieces, right, as the entities, but it's really good from a city perspective and a county perspective to each of us hear what's happening in the other one's world. And then October 11th, we'll be back here at City Hall for our next regular board meeting. That'll be at 7 p.m. in council chambers. Does anyone else have anything for the good of the cause? Or anything that I forgot? All right. I would then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Nay.
And the motion carries. Thank you and have a good night.